Before I dive into the story, here's a quick summary to hook you in. I never expected my sister's husband to seek me out, let alone confess the real reason he made that long trip to visit us. What he revealed when we were finally alone changed everything I thought I knew about our family. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, and before you start listening, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It helps more than you know. The day he arrived, the house felt unusually quiet, as if it had been holding its breath. I'd seen David dozens of times over the years, always with my sister glued to his side, always polite, always steady, a man who carried calm the way others wore cologne. But that afternoon, when he stepped through my door with his overnight bag slung over his shoulder, something about him felt heavier. His smile was there, but faint, like it had been borrowed rather than born from him. My sister had called the night before, her voice hurried. David needed a little getaway, she said. Work stress. A break. Could he stay with me for a few days? I didn't question it. Families help each other. That's what we do. Still, as I led him into the living room, offering him tea, I sensed an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. The late winter light spilled in through the window, warming the wooden floors, catching the dust in the air, making everything feel softer, gentler. Yet he seemed almost afraid to meet my eyes for more than a moment. We talked about ordinary things at first. My job, his drive, the weather that refused to make up its mind. But every time he paused, every time he shifted in his chair, I could feel something gathering behind his words, like a storm waiting for the right moment to break. Later, when I showed him to the guest room, he lingered in the doorway instead of stepping inside. He looked around quietly, taking in the neatly folded blankets, the small lamp on the nightstand, the window that opened onto my backyard. Then he turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen before, earnest, almost vulnerable. I appreciate you letting me stay, he said softly. More than you know. There was something in the way he said it that tugged at me, a sincerity that felt deeper than politeness. I opened my mouth to ask what was really going on, but he shook his head slightly, as if telling me the moment wasn't ready yet. The evening passed slowly. I made us dinner, simple roasted vegetables and chicken, and we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Every so often, our eyes would meet, and he'd look away again, troubled. The tension wasn't sharp or frightening. It was warm, human, like two people circling a truth they weren't sure how to approach. When the house finally settled for the night, dishes washed, lights dimmed, and the quiet humming around us felt almost intimate, I found him standing by the back door, looking out into the darkness. I joined him. The moonlight lay across the grass like a thin silver sheet. He glanced at me. This time he didn't look away. There's something I need to tell you, he said, and I didn't come here because of work stress. I came because I didn't know who else I could talk to. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight of his sincerity. I could feel that whatever was coming next would change things, even if only in the small, quiet corners of our lives. But he wasn't ready to continue. Not yet. He swallowed hard, offered a tight smile, and said goodnight. I watched him disappear down the hallway, wondering why it suddenly felt like tomorrow would bring a revelation I wasn't sure I was prepared for. The next morning, the house felt different. Lighter somehow, even though David was still here. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, dust motes floating lazily in the warm air. I made coffee, the smell filling the quiet corners of the room, and when he joined me at the table, there was a pause, a shared understanding that yesterday's conversation had left its mark even without words. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Sleep well? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Better than I expected, he said, and I noticed the way his hands wrapped around the worn mug, as if holding on to something steady in the midst of uncertainty. We talked again, but cautiously this time, skimming over trivial matters. A joke about the slow-moving traffic, a comment on the neighbor's garden, the way the sunlight made the wooden floorboards glow. But underneath it, there was tension, a current I could feel with every glance, every half-smile. Later, I found myself in the living room, tidying up, when David appeared behind me. He leaned against the doorway, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if stepping into this space was allowed. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice low, almost trembling. Something I've never said out loud. I felt my stomach tighten, a strange mixture of anticipation and worry. "You can tell me anything," I said softly, and I meant it. Somehow, this moment, this quiet confession, felt inevitable. He took a deep breath and finally met my gaze. "It's not just stress that brought me here," he began. It's something personal. Something I can't share with anyone else, at least not without risking a part of myself I'm not ready to lose." I nodded, encouraging him silently, though my heart was hammering. There was an honesty in his tone that made the air between us feel fragile, like it could shatter at any moment if handled wrong. "I've been feeling lost," he continued, "not just in my career, but in life. And seeing you, being here with you, it's reminded me of something I've forgotten. Something important about connection, about trust." I didn't interrupt. I just listened, leaning back slightly, letting him find the words at his own pace. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old clock on the wall, and the occasional creak of the floor under our weight. Finally, he reached out, just slightly, and placed a hand near mine on the coffee table. Not touching, just close enough to be felt. "I don't want to overstep or make things complicated," he said, "but I needed someone to understand me, really understand, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can." I swallowed hard, feeling warmth spreading through me, a mixture of empathy, compassion, and a subtle, unfamiliar pull. "Hi, I'm here," I said quietly. "You don't have to face anything alone." He nodded, a breath of relief passing through him. There was a pause, delicate and heavy with unspoken meaning. Outside, the wind rustled the bare branches of the trees, and the sunlight shifted, painting golden streaks across his face. I noticed the small details, the way his eyes softened, the faint lines around his mouth, the way he seemed smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen. In that moment, everything else faded. Not fear, not doubt, not the unspoken rules of family. Just the fragile, raw connection between two people who had found themselves unexpectedly in each other's orbit. And I realized that this visit wasn't just about a break from work. It was about honesty, about facing something buried deep inside. And somehow, even though I didn't yet understand the full story, I knew that I wanted to be there, to witness it, to support him, whatever it meant. He looked at me again, this time steady, and for a brief moment, the room felt suspended in time. We both knew that the days ahead would hold difficult conversations, confessions, and maybe choices we couldn't yet predict, but also that this fragile trust had been formed, and nothing could erase it. That afternoon the house seemed quieter than usual, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for what might happen next. I found David sitting on the couch, staring out the window at the gray sky. The faint hum of the heater and the soft ticking of the wall clock were the only sounds. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from him, careful not to break the fragile calm. "I've been thinking a lot about what I said yesterday," he began, his voice low, almost hesitant. "About being lost. About trust. And there's more I need to tell you. Something I've never admitted, not to my wife, not to anyone." My heart skipped. I leaned slightly forward. "You can tell me. I'm listening." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I hadn't noticed before. It revealed a side of him I rarely saw, vulnerable, human, fragile in a way that made me ache. "It's complicated," he said. "I never meant to burden anyone, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when I felt empty. I nodded, encouraging him without speaking, letting him shape his own confession. The air between us was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest, real, something I hadn't realized I craved until this moment. He took a deep breath, and his eyes met mine with an intensity that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. I came here because I needed someone to see me, to really see me without judgment. I don't expect anything. I had to tell someone, and it couldn't be anyone else. His hand moved slightly, closer to mine, hesitating as if he was testing boundaries. I didn't pull away. I felt a strange mixture of calm and tension, a connection that was electric yet gentle, like walking on ice over water, aware of the risk, but drawn to the surface anyway. I feel like I've been carrying all this alone for so long, he said, his voice breaking slightly. And being here with you, I don't know how to explain it, but it feels like relief, like a weight I didn't even know I had is finally lifting. I reached out, placing my hand lightly near his, letting him sense that I was there, fully present. "You're not alone," I said softly. "Not anymore." The room seemed to hold its breath with us. Outside, the sky had turned a pale, wintry blue, and the light hit his face, highlighting the contours, the subtle expressions of someone who had been through too much but was beginning to trust again. He exhaled, a sound of release, and leaned back slightly, as if testing the air, testing the possibility that he could be allowed to be this open, this vulnerable. "I've spent so long hiding," he admitted, "hiding from myself, from my wife, from everyone. And now I feel like I can finally stop." I didn't say anything. I just watched him, feeling the gravity of the moment, the unexpected intimacy that wasn't physical, but deeper. Something emotional, profound, and entirely human. For hours, we talked in fragments, small confessions, tentative admissions, moments of silence that spoke louder than words. There were tears, yes, but also laughter, brief and surprising, as we discovered the fragile joy of being understood. And when evening came, the sky turning shades of violet and silver, I realized that something had shifted. Something invisible, yet undeniable. The tension that had hovered around us for days had transformed into trust, into a quiet, mutual understanding that neither of us had anticipated. David looked at me, a gentle smile touching his lips, and for the first time, I saw a man who was unburdened, even if only slightly. And in that smile, I recognized the power of honesty, of connection, and of allowing oneself to be truly seen. That night, as he retired to the guest room, there was no awkwardness, no hesitation. Only a quiet gratitude, a bond formed in the unlikeliest of circumstances, a fragile trust that promised more revelations in the days to come. The next morning, the house felt unusually still, almost sacred in its quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the wooden floors, and the faint scent of coffee lingered in the air. David and I had fallen into an easy rhythm, sharing breakfast and small talk, yet beneath the surface, a tension lingered, the unspoken truth he had been carrying all this time. After the dishes were done, he asked me to sit with him in the living room. There was an intensity in his eyes, a vulnerability that made my chest tighten. He took a deep breath, fingers interlacing nervously, and finally said the words I had sensed but never fully heard. "I came here because I've been struggling with my marriage," he confessed. "Not because I don't love my wife, but because I've lost touch with myself. And seeing you, being with you, reminded me of what it feels like to be understood, to be accepted without pretense." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his honesty. There was no deceit, no manipulation, just a man exposing the fragile parts of himself, trusting me with a truth he had hidden even from those closest to him. "I never meant for this to happen," he continued, "but I needed someone to listen, someone who could see me, really see me. And in a way, you've done that. The room was silent except for the ticking clock and the faint rustle of the curtains in the breeze. I felt an unexpected warmth, a deep empathy that I couldn't ignore. I understand, I said softly, and I'm glad you trusted me enough to tell me. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and gratitude, and for a moment, everything else, my sister, the world outside, the past, faded away. We weren't brother and sister, we weren't intruders in each other's lives. For this brief, fragile moment, we were just two human beings connecting, honestly and fully, without judgment. I don't want to complicate things, he said, but I had to be honest with myself, and with someone who could understand, and that someone was you. I reached out and placed my hand lightly over his, a gesture of comfort and acknowledgement. You're not alone anymore, I said, and you don't have to carry this burden by yourself. He exhaled, a soft, relieved sound, and for the first time since his arrival, he smiled fully, without hesitation. The tension that had hung in the air all week had dissolved, replaced by something quieter, gentler, trust, connection, and understanding. The days that followed were easier. David spoke more freely, shared his thoughts without fear, and I listened, offering support and companionship. The bond we had formed was subtle but profound, rooted in honesty and mutual respect, a reminder that human connection can appear in the most unexpected places. By the time my sister returned, I could see a difference in him, a calmness, a steadiness, a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He didn't hide his struggles, but he carried them with newfound clarity, knowing he had someone who understood. And as I watched them greet each other, I realized something important. The truth doesn't have to destroy, and honesty, even in its most delicate form, can bring healing. What had begun as a visit under the guise of work stress had become something far more meaningful, a reminder of the power of trust, of empathy, and of human connection. I smiled quietly to myself, the memory of those conversations lingering like sunlight on the floorboards. Life doesn't always go according to plan, but sometimes the moments that challenge us the most are the ones that help us grow, understand, and ultimately connect. And in that quiet reflection, I knew that both of us had changed, subtly, profoundly, and for the better.